After the Jew Island raid, Sung Jin-Woo arrived at the memorial service wearing a black suit. The moment he stepped out, reporters turned their cameras toward him, capturing every moment. The ceremony honored the hunters who had sacrificed their lives during the island operation, a mission that had become one of the most talked about events in the nation. The raid also marked Jinwoo's first official mission after being reclassified as an S-rank hunter, making it his public debut at the highest level. The entire country had witnessed his overwhelming power as he defeated the terrifying Ant King, while his shadow soldiers effortlessly held back the endless ant army. The successful raid quickly became headline news. Discussions spread across the internet, and Sung Jin-Woo's name dominated every conversation. Many admired his incredible strength and praised him as the hero who ended the nightmare on Jew Island. However, not everyone shared the same opinion. Some argued that if he had joined the battle sooner, even more lives could have been saved. Although countless people defended him, the painful loss of so many hunters continued to fuel criticism. Standing beneath the gray, overcast sky, Jinwoo quietly paid his respects before the memorial. His solemn expression reflected the heavy atmosphere surrounding the ceremony. White flowers covered the memorial site, silently honoring those who had given their lives during the raid. Friends, families, and fellow hunters gathered together, united in grief. Among the mourners was Baek Yunho, who was still mourning the death of his close friend, Byung-gyu. Overcome with emotion, he approached Jinwoo. Baek admitted that he had always believed no single individual could ever bring an end to a war. But after witnessing everything that happened on Jew Island, he realized he had been wrong. Despite the tragic losses, Jinwoo had succeeded in ending the island's long-standing nightmare. The fifth Jew Island raid involved a total of 32 civilians had lost their lives. Although every death was heartbreaking, the casualty count was far lower than in the previous 4 attempts, making the mission a hard-earned but bittersweet victory. Later, Jinwoo met with Hunters Association President Go Gun-hee to discuss what lay ahead. President Go explained that, as an S-rank hunter, Jinwoo did not need to go through the normal procedures required to establish a guild. A single phone call to the Hunters Association would be enough for him to become a guild master. Jinwoo considered the idea, thinking it might be worthwhile to learn more about the advantages that came with his new status. During their conversation, President Go brought up a mysterious incident that had occurred after the raid. Soldiers and hunters assigned to clean up Jew Island had suddenly lost consciousness without warning. Even experienced A rank and B rank members of the Knights Guild had been affected. Go wondered if Jinwoo had accidentally left behind some kind of magical barrier or spell. Confused, Jinwoo immediately denied it, insisting he had done nothing of the sort. President Go accepted his answer, but the mystery remained unsolved. None of the victims could remember anything that happened just before they blacked out, leaving the Hunters Association completely baffled. They could not determine whether it was a hidden trap left behind by the ants or an entirely different threat. Their discussion was interrupted when an association employee informed President Go that an important guest had arrived earlier than expected. Apologizing to Jinwoo, President Go excused himself to handle the meeting. Jinwoo didn't mind and decided it was time to leave. As he walked toward his car, someone called out to him. Turning around, Jinwoo saw a man approaching with a friendly smile. The man introduced himself as Adam White, a senior official from the Federal Bureau of Hunters. Jinwoo was surprised since he had never dealt with the Bureau before. Adam explained that he had been trying to contact him for quite some time and had even visited his office. That reminded Jinwoo of something Eugene Ho had mentioned earlier about a stranger leaving behind a business card. Curious about the unexpected meeting, Jinwoo asked Adam why he had been searching for him. Adam White explained that he had information to share, knowledge that no country or organization other than the Federal Bureau of Hunters could provide. Intrigued, Jinwoo questioned why they would reveal something so valuable to him. Adam smiled and explained that the Bureau believed in building relationships with exceptional hunters. After witnessing Jinwoo's incredible performance during the Jew Island raid, the Bureau's deputy director had personally requested a meeting with him. Adam invited Jinwoo to accompany him. Although he remained cautious, Jinwoo agreed to hear them out. As he reached for his car door, he admitted he wasn't convinced the information would be worth his time. That's when Adam mentioned a single word that immediately caught his attention: an upgrader. According to Adam, An upgrader was a rare awakened individual capable of enhancing the abilities of other awakened beings. The revelation instantly sparked Jinwoo's curiosity, and he decided to ride with Adam to meet the Bureau's deputy director. When they arrived, Jinwoo met Michael Connor, the deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Hunters. Connor wasted no time getting to the point. He placed immigration documents on the table, offering Jinwoo immediate American citizenship if he chose to accept. Jinwoo barely glanced at the papers. His attention was fixed on the mysterious upgrader Adam had mentioned. Connor nodded and invited the woman into the room. A middle-aged woman entered and introduced herself as Norma Selner, the world's only known upgrader. Connor explained that she possessed the unique ability to strengthen awakened individuals beyond their natural limits. The moment she entered, Jinwoo sensed that she was unlike any awakened person he had encountered before. Noticing the doubt in his expression, Selner calmly explained her abilities. She admitted that nearly everyone questioned her powers at first, but said their skepticism always disappeared once they experienced her gift firsthand. She explained that every awakened person was born with a fixed limit to their strength. Unless they underwent a rare second awakening, that ceiling could never be broken. However, her ability allowed hunters to surpass those natural restrictions through a 3-stage enhancement process. Connor confirmed everything she said, adding that Selner could only perform the procedure on a handful of people each year because using her power placed an enormous burden on her body. Jinwoo silently considered her words. If they were true, her ability was nothing short of extraordinary. Curious, he asked how much stronger the process could make someone. Selner replied that the results differed from person to person, but after completing all 3 stages, most hunters experienced an overall increase in strength of roughly 20 to 30%. The answer genuinely surprised Jinwoo. At that moment, he finally understood why elite hunters such as Huang Dong-Su had chosen to relocate to the United States despite the criticism they received. An opportunity like this was simply too valuable for ambitious hunters to ignore. Jinwoo also realized something else. If the public ever learned about Selner's abilities, countless nations and guilds would fight over her. Connor assured him that the Bureau fully understood that risk. They kept Selner under strict protection and rewarded her generously in exchange for using her abilities only on carefully selected hunters. Now, they wanted to extend that same privilege to Sung Jin-Woo, believing someone of his talent deserved the opportunity. Jinwoo carefully weighed the proposal. Connor explained that if he chose to work with the Federal Bureau of Hunters, he would receive the highest priority, exceptional treatment, and every possible advantage when negotiating contracts with American guilds. Selner added that there was no pressure to make an immediate decision. They were simply presenting the opportunities available to him. Even so, Jinwoo couldn't ignore one important question. Why would you offer something this valuable for free? Connor and Selner both insisted it was a gesture of goodwill, a chance to build a lasting relationship with one of the world's strongest hunters. Jinwoo remembered Selner confidently saying that once he experienced her ability, he would naturally want more. With a reassuring smile, Selner gently took hold of his wrist and asked him to come closer. She instructed him to look directly into her eyes as she began the first stage of the enhancement process. Watching from nearby, Connor felt confident. In his mind, everything was going according to plan. Once Jinwoo experienced the first stage, Connor believed he would eagerly agree to continue the process, and perhaps even sign the immigration papers immediately afterward. But the moment Selner met Jinwoo's gaze, everything changed. Her vision was suddenly swallowed by complete darkness. Startled, she desperately searched for even the smallest trace of light, but there was nothing. Then, from within the endless darkness, a shadow slowly emerged. It advanced toward her with an overwhelming presence that sent chills through her entire body. When the colossal shadow finally opened its eyes and looked directly into hers, sheer terror seized her heart. Unable to withstand the overwhelming fear, Selner let out a piercing scream. She stumbled backward, lost her balance, and fell from her chair in horror. Norma Selner's terrified scream sent shockwaves through the room. The 2 agents assigned to protect her reacted instantly, drawing their weapons and aiming them directly at Jinwoo. Panic had completely taken over their judgment. Michael Connor immediately stepped between them. "Lower your weapons," he shouted. Furious at their reckless behavior, Connor reminded the agents exactly who they were confronting. If they had pointed guns at someone like Thomas Andre or Liu Jigang, they wouldn't have survived the encounter. Realizing the gravity of their mistake, the agents quickly holstered their weapons and rushed to help the trembling Selner. Connor then bowed deeply to Jinwoo, sincerely apologizing for his men's actions. Still trying to process everything that had happened, Jinwoo calmly accepted the apology, assuring him there was no need to worry. Connor immediately turned back to the agents and sternly reprimanded them, making it clear how dangerously close they had come to creating a disaster. The shaken agents could only lower their heads and admit their mistake, fully aware of how badly the situation could have ended. Once the tension subsided, Connor knelt beside Norma Selner. She was drenched in sweat, breathing heavily, and trembling uncontrollably. Concerned for her condition, he gently asked if she was all right. Seeing that she was in no state to continue, Connor decided to postpone the meeting with Sung Jin-Woo. Curious about what had just occurred, Jinwoo quietly agreed to leave. Connor instructed Adam White to escort him out while he remained behind with Selner. After Jinwoo departed, Connor immediately questioned Selner, desperate to understand what had frightened her so badly. Still struggling to steady her breathing, she pressed a hand against her chest before finally speaking. What she revealed left Connor speechless. Sung Jin-Woo isn't an ordinary hunter. She described him as a king, but not merely a powerful ruler. He was something far greater than anything she had ever witnessed. Connor's eyes widened. Are you saying he's as strong as a national-level hunter? Selner slowly shook her head. It isn't about strength. She admitted she had never experienced anything remotely similar before. The moment she looked into Jinwoo's eyes, she hadn't seen the man standing before her. Instead, she had glimpsed something hidden deep within him, an endless darkness that stared back at her. Its presence was immeasurable, ancient, terrifying. It wasn't Jinwoo himself that filled her with fear, but the incomprehensible being residing inside him. The overwhelming encounter had shaken her to her very core. Before the conversation ended, Selner shared one final revelation. There is no limit to Sung Jin-Woo's power. At the Hunters Association, Chairman Go Gun-hee sat alone, weighed down by his thoughts. His mind kept returning to the Jew Island raid, especially the death of Min Byung-gyu. Although Byung-gyu had already retired from active duty, he had still given his life to save others. The sacrifice left a deep impression on Go Gun-hee. As chairman, he couldn't help wondering how many more hunters would lose their lives before the battles were finally over. While he sat quietly reflecting, his phone suddenly rang. The urgent voice on the other end immediately reported an emergency. A B rank gate had appeared in the middle of a busy roadway. Go Gun-hee's expression hardened. A gate of that level wasn't something ordinary hunter teams could casually deal with. Immediate action was necessary. He began considering which major guild should be dispatched. Then he remembered something. Sung Jin-Woo had recently established an office not far from the incident. Meanwhile, Jinwoo was driving through heavy traffic, his thoughts still occupied by the bizarre meeting with Norma Selner. He couldn't stop wondering what she had seen. Whatever it was, it had terrified the world's only upgrader enough to make her collapse. Before he could think any further, his phone vibrated. The caller ID displayed Chairman Go Gun-hee. Jinwoo answered immediately. Go Gun-hee explained the emergency without wasting a second. A B rank gate had appeared on one of the city's busiest roads, bringing traffic to a standstill. Since Jinwoo was already nearby, the chairman asked if he could deal with the gate before the situation escalated. Slightly surprised by the request, Jinwoo hesitated. Am I even allowed to intervene without receiving official authorization first? Chairman Go Gun-hee chuckled and reassured Jinwoo that there was nothing to worry about. As the head of the Hunters Association, he had the authority to grant permission himself. Jinwoo couldn't help but smile at the chairman's playful confidence. With approval secured, he stepped out of his vehicle and headed toward the gate. Following the dense flow of mana, he made his way through the growing crowd. Reporters had already gathered at the scene, their cameras flashing non-stop as police officers and Hunters Association employees worked to secure the area and keep civilians at a safe distance. As Jinwoo approached the gate, a female association employee quickly stopped him, demanding to know where he was going. The moment she recognized him, however, Her expression completely changed. Standing before her was none other than Sung Jin-Woo, the newly recognized S-rank hunter. The surrounding crowd quickly realized who had arrived, and excitement spread through the scene. Whispers erupted among reporters and bystanders as everyone watched to see what would happen next. Despite her surprise, the employee tried to follow protocol. She respectfully explained that, even as an S-rank hunter, he couldn't enter the gate without official authorization and an appropriate raid team. Seeing that the discussion was going nowhere, Jinwoo calmly took out his phone and called Chairman Go Gunny. After the chairman answered, Jinwoo handed the phone to the employee. "Please speak with someone you can't refuse." Nervously, she accepted the phone. After a brief conversation with Chairman Go, her tense expression immediately softened. She returned the phone and gave Jinwoo permission to proceed. Without another word, he stepped through the gate and vanished into the darkness beyond. Watching him disappear, the employee sighed in frustration. Half joking to herself, she muttered that she hoped the arrogant hunter would at least stumble and learn a lesson. The words had barely left her mouth when terrified screams erupted from the crowd. Everyone turned toward the gate. The portal's black surface was changing. Within seconds, it transformed into a horrifying crimson color. It had become a red gate. Panic instantly swept across the area. Experienced hunters and association personnel knew exactly what that meant. Unlike ordinary gates, a red gate sealed itself completely after activation. No one could enter from the outside, and no one trapped within could escape until every monster inside had been defeated. The female employee froze. Her face turned pale as she stared at the blood-red portal. For a brief moment, she couldn't help wondering if her careless words had somehow cursed the situation. Inside the gate, Jinwoo immediately sensed that something was wrong. The atmosphere had changed. The air felt unbearably heavy, filled with an oppressive pressure unlike anything inside a normal dungeon. He instantly realized the truth. This wasn't an ordinary gate anymore. It had become a red gate, a place feared even by veteran hunters, where countless raid parties had met their end. Jinwoo quietly steadied himself. He knew this battle would demand far more than usual. As he walked deeper into the dungeon, his thoughts drifted to a recent conversation with his mother. Now that he had become an S-rank hunter, she understood that his life had changed forever. Rather than trying to stop him, she shared a memory about his father. Before becoming a hunter, his father had worked as a firefighter, risking his life to save complete strangers without hesitation. That unwavering courage was what had made her fall in love with him. She believed Jinwoo had inherited that same spirit. He was the kind of person who would always step forward when others needed help, no matter the danger. Remembering her words filled him with quiet determination. He wasn't fighting simply to survive. He was carrying on the legacy of the man who had inspired him from the very beginning. At the same time, he remembered his mother's gentle warning. She had only asked him to be careful and never push himself beyond his limits. Knowing that she accepted his path as a hunter brought him comfort. A faint smile crossed his face. "This won't be too much for me," he thought. Moments later, the battle began. At Jinwoo's command, his shadow soldiers surged forward like a black tide, colliding head-on with the approaching horde of magical beasts. The battlefield erupted into chaos. While his shadow army fought relentlessly, Jinwoo remained perfectly calm, directing every movement with precise control. His soldiers advanced without fear, cutting through wave after wave of monsters with overwhelming efficiency. To Jinwoo, however, hunting was about more than simply defeating monsters. The greatest challenge was ensuring that the hunter never became the hunted. It was a lesson he had learned through countless life and death battles. And he had no intention of forgetting it now. His cold eyes scanned the battlefield. The first wave of enemies had already been completely annihilated. But Jinwoo knew better than to relax. The true challenge was only just beginning. Determined to bring the raid to a swift end, Sung Jin-Woo pressed deeper into the red gate, ready to face whatever awaited him. Moments later, the dungeon's boss finally revealed himself. Surrounded by his elite guards, the towering monster radiated confidence and authority as it surveyed the battlefield, searching for the human who had massacred its army. Its eyes locked onto Jinwoo. With a voice filled with fury and a trace of reluctant admiration, the boss spoke. It acknowledged how astonishing it was that a mere human had slaughtered so many of its warriors with such ease. Even more surprising was the fact that Jinwoo could understand and speak their language. Certain that victory was still within reach, the boss called for the rest of its army to surround the intruder. But nothing happened. Silence answered its command. Confused, the monster looked around the battlefield before shouting again, expecting thousands of soldiers to respond. There was only eerie stillness. Not a single warrior remained. What the boss didn't know was that Jinwoo's shadow army had already wiped out every last one of its troops. Long before the confrontation began, the battlefield had already fallen completely under Jinwoo's control. Hearing himself referred to as a small human, Jinwoo couldn't help but smile. Small? He thought with quiet amusement. That's funny. With a simple command, shadows began to stir across the battlefield. One after another, his shadow soldiers emerged from the darkness, rising silently from the ground like an unstoppable army. The hunt had only just begun. The remaining magical beasts were immediately caught in carefully planned ambushes. Hidden in the shadows, Jinwoo's soldiers struck with flawless precision, cutting down every enemy before they even realized they had been attacked. Within moments, the battlefield was completely cleared. The boss stood frozen in disbelief. The powerful army that had once stood behind him had vanished without a trace. Driven by desperation, the monster stretched out its hand and unleashed its final trump card. The surrounding forest shook violently. Massive trees split apart as enormous wooden beasts emerged from within their trunks, answering their master's call. But the reinforcements never had the chance to attack. Baru, one of Jinwoo's strongest shadow soldiers, moved like a blur. Before the newly summoned monsters could even take a single step, Baru flashed across the battlefield, severing their heads one after another with terrifying speed. The battlefield fell silent once again. Jinwoo and his shadow army continued advancing. Their overwhelming presence alone was enough to crush the enemy's spirit. The boss stared at them in horror, unable to speak as the reality of his defeat finally sank in. Without hesitation, Jinwoo gave the order. Attack! His shadow soldiers surged forward. Leading the charge was Baru, whose overwhelming power shook the battlefield itself. The surviving magical beasts desperately threw themselves into battle, fighting with everything they had left. It made no difference. The shadow army tore through them with ruthless efficiency. There was no hesitation, no mercy, only complete domination. Amid the chaos, two gigantic centaur-like monsters charged directly toward Jinwoo, raising their massive weapons as they closed the distance. Before either could reach him, Tank leaped into their path. The enormous shadow beast met their attack head-on. With a single overwhelming display of strength, Tank ripped both centaurs apart, scattering their broken bodies across the battlefield. Watching his entire army disappear before his eyes, the boss let out a desperate roar. He called out to his fallen warriors, hoping someone, anyone, would answer. Only silence replied. Then Baru appeared. Moving faster than the eye could follow, the shadow soldier closed the distance in an instant. With one swift strike, Baru drove his razor-sharp claws straight through the boss's body. At that very moment, Igris appeared. With a single elegant yet deadly swing of his sword, he severed the boss's arm cleanly from its body. The monster collapsed to its knees, dark blood pouring from its wounds as it let out a deafening scream of agony. Before it had any chance to recover, Tusk stepped forward. The powerful shadow mage activated him of giants, causing his massive body to grow even larger. Towering over the battlefield, Tusk then cast inverse gravity, seizing the weakened boss with overwhelming magical force before violently slamming it into the ground. The impact shook the entire dungeon. When the dust settled, the boss lay broken and bleeding, barely clinging to life. Jinwoo calmly walked toward the defeated creature. His expression remained cold and unreadable as he stood over the dying monster. In a quiet but commanding voice, he demanded answers. He assured the boss that if it cooperated, he would grant it a swift end to its suffering. The magic beast remained silent. Blood trickled from its mouth, but it refused, or perhaps was unable, to answer. Jinwoo let out a quiet sigh. So, you can't speak. He immediately suspected the system was interfering once again. It must be preventing you from telling me the truth, he thought. But sooner or later, I'll uncover everything. Setting the matter aside, Jinwoo opened his inventory. After a brief moment, he withdrew an old key. It wasn't an ordinary item. He had obtained it from the cursed random box after defeating the demon monarch, Baron, in the demon castle. At the time, the key had contained no explanation whatsoever, leaving him completely puzzled about its purpose. Now, however, things were different. During the Jew Island raid, Jinwoo had reached level 100, and that milestone had finally unlocked the hidden information attached to the mysterious key. The system displayed a new message. Conditions fulfilled. The key unlocks the entrance to the Kartinon Temple. It can only be used at the designated gate. The location of that gate will be revealed after the allotted time has passed. The words Kartinon Temple echoed through Jinwoo's mind. A forgotten memory suddenly resurfaced. He remembered the double dungeon, the ancient temple hidden at its deepest point, the terrifying stone statues, the giant stone tablet, the deadly commandments. Everything came rushing back with perfect clarity. At last, the scattered pieces of the puzzle began fitting together. The system wasn't leading him somewhere new. It was guiding him back to the very place where everything had begun. The dungeon that had changed his life forever. The place where he had first encountered the mysterious system. This time, however, Jinwoo felt certain that his return carried a far greater meaning. If everything had been planned from the beginning, if the system had been waiting all this time, then he knew he could no longer ignore the truth hidden within that temple. Elsewhere, Jinwoo sat in front of his computer with an intense look of concentration. His eyes rapidly scanned countless websites, forums, and social media posts. Like a hawk searching for its prey, he carefully monitored every discussion involving Sung Jin-Woo. His objective was simple: protect Jinwoo's reputation at all costs. The moment he leaned back to rest his eyes, a familiar voice suddenly spoke behind him. "Everything okay?" Startled, Jinwoo nearly jumped out of his chair. He spun around in shock and found Jinwoo standing quietly behind him, still dressed in his hunting gear. Relieved, Jinwoo let out a nervous laugh. Jinwoo asked whether anything troublesome had happened while he was away. Jinwoo quickly shook his head. "No, everything's been fine." Then his curiosity took over. Looking at Jinwoo's equipment, he asked why he was still wearing his combat gear. Jinwoo casually explained that he had just finished clearing a gate. Since they needed money to establish and operate their guild, he had collected several high-grade magic cores from the dungeon. Jinwoo's eyes widened in amazement. In what sounded like an ordinary errand to Jinwoo, he had effortlessly cleared a high-ranking gate and secured enough valuable magic cores to provide the guild with a strong financial foundation. With resources like those, paying future employees and covering the guild's operating expenses would no longer be a concern. Once again, Jinwoo was reminded that what seemed routine for Sung Jin-Woo was something most hunters could only dream of accomplishing. Jinwoo looked puzzled when Jinwoo mentioned hiring employees. Seeing his confusion, Jinwoo reminded him that they couldn't officially establish their guild with only the two of them. They still needed at least one additional member to satisfy the requirements. Then Jinwoo brought up another issue he considered just as important: the guild's name. To Jinwoo, it seemed like a minor detail. To Jinwoo, however, it was the foundation of the guild's identity. Excited, he began enthusiastically suggesting names. "How about Sungyu Guild?" he proposed, combining their family names. When that didn't receive much of a reaction, he quickly offered another. "Or maybe Wooho Guild, using the last syllables of our names." Not stopping there, he even suggested Jin Guild, created from the middle syllables of their names. Jinwoo listened quietly before casually giving his own suggestion: Solo Play Guild. To him, it perfectly reflected the way he had always fought, alone. Jinwoo stared at him in disbelief. He couldn't tell whether his boss was joking or completely serious. Although he admired Jinwoo immensely, he couldn't help thinking that comedy simply wasn't one of his talents. The name sounded strange, reminding Jinwoo that even someone as extraordinary as Sung Jin-Woo still had his own unique quirks. Before they could continue the discussion, someone knocked on the office door. Jinwoo frowned. He wasn't expecting any visitors. Opening the door cautiously, he heard a polite voice ask, "Is this Hunter Sung Jin-Woo's guild office?" When Jinho looked up, he froze. Standing outside was none other than Cha Hae-in. Inside the office, Jinwoo was equally surprised. He couldn't imagine why one of the nation's strongest hunters would suddenly visit such a small, newly established guild. After inviting her inside, he asked the obvious question. What brings you here? Hae-in answered without hesitation. I want to join your guild. The unexpected response left Jinwoo speechless. Trying to understand her motives, he asked whether Chairman Go-Gunhee had sent her or whether she had been removed from the Hunters Guild. Hae-in calmly denied both possibilities. Still unconvinced, Jinwoo asked why she would choose such a small guild, especially one that he had jokingly named Solo Play Guild. Hearing the name, Hae-in looked visibly flustered. It was clearly not what she had expected. Jinwoo, however, saw nothing unusual about it. He confidently claimed that both he and Jinho had already agreed on the name. Jinho immediately objected. No, we absolutely did not. Ignoring the protest, Jinwoo remained convinced they had reached an agreement, brushing the matter aside with his usual calm attitude. Returning to the real issue, Jinwoo carefully studied Hae-in. He observed her breathing, her heartbeat, her expression. Every small movement told him the same thing. She was hiding something. Why was she so determined to join his guild? Jinwoo then pointed out that Hae-in had been an awakened hunter for nearly 2 years and assumed she was still under contract with the Hunters Guild. To his surprise, she revealed that she was prepared to pay the contract termination penalty herself. She wasn't asking Jinwoo's guild to cover any of the costs. That only deepened his confusion. Why would you go that far? What could this guild possibly offer you? For a moment, Hae-in lowered her head in silence. She couldn't bring herself to reveal the real reason. Ever since meeting Jinwoo, she had been drawn toward him. Unlike every other hunter she had encountered, he carried a unique scent that only she could perceive, a scent that brought her an inexplicable sense of comfort. Her thoughts drifted back to the battle on Jew Island. In those desperate moments, she had been convinced she was going to die. Yet when she regained consciousness aboard the rescue helicopter, the very first person she thought about was Sung Jin-Woo. Even Chairman Go-Gunhee had told her that Jinwoo's presence had been what calmed her during those terrifying moments. Those feelings had only grown stronger since then. She wanted to stand beside him, to fight alongside him, to face life and death together. But those emotions were far too personal to confess aloud. Meanwhile, Jinwoo remembered the way Hae-in had acted during the memorial service. Looking back, he realized she had probably been considering this decision for quite some time. After composing herself, Hae-in finally raised her head. Meeting Jinwoo's eyes, she offered a simple, carefully prepared explanation. I just want a quieter, simpler life. Jinwoo listened quietly. Although her words sounded reasonable, he could tell they weren't the whole truth. Sensing the awkward silence, Jinho spoke up. He reminded Jinwoo that Hae-in had likely been under tremendous pressure within the Hunters Guild. She was still only 22 or 23 years old, yet she carried the responsibilities expected of an S-rank hunter. After the devastating losses suffered during the Jew Island raid, losing their strongest remaining member would be another massive blow to the guild. Jinwoo understood that burden better than most. Even so, he knew this wasn't a decision he could make lightly. Before accepting someone as important as Cha Hae-in into his guild, he needed to think carefully about what lay ahead. To measure Cha Hae-in's determination, Jinwoo decided that anyone wishing to join his guild would first have to pass an entrance test. Hae-in blinked in surprise. There wasn't any mention of a test in the recruitment notice. Without missing a beat, Jinwoo calmly replied that it had always been part of the process and suggested that Jinho had simply forgotten to mention it. Before continuing, he sent Jinho out to buy drinks and snacks, giving the two of them some time alone to prepare. The instant Hae-in heard the word test, her entire demeanor changed. The relaxed expression on her face disappeared. In its place was the focused gaze of an S-rank hunter. Her posture straightened, her eyes sharpened, and an unmistakable determination radiated from her. For a brief moment, even Jinwoo was caught off guard. Was she truly taking this so seriously? The answer was obvious. The determination in her eyes left no room for doubt. Jinwoo explained that her opponent would be one of his shadow soldiers. Not just any soldier. His strongest swordsman. Even after hearing that, Hae-in showed no sign of hesitation. There was no fear. only quiet confidence. Satisfied with her resolve, Jinwoo suggested they hold the test inside the Hunters Association's training gymnasium. Without another word, they both stood up at almost the same time. The decision had been made. Then an idea crossed Jinwoo's mind. The gymnasium was some distance away. Rather than driving there, he wanted to see whether Shadow Exchange could transport another person along with him. Looking at Hae-in, he calmly spoke. "We don't have to go the usual way. If you stay close to me, I can take a shortcut." Hae-in instinctively stepped closer. As Jinwoo closed the remaining distance between them, she felt her heart skip a beat. Before she had time to react, he activated Shadow Exchange. The shadows beneath their feet spread outward. An instant later, both of them silently disappeared into the darkness. Back at the office, Jinho returned carrying tea and snacks. The room, however, was strangely quiet. Jinwoo and Hae-in were gone. Instead, a towering high-orc shadow soldier sat comfortably in Jinwoo's chair. The moment the shadow noticed the refreshments, it wasted no time. Without the slightest hesitation, it grabbed the snacks and began devouring them. Jinho could only stand there in stunned silence, watching the unexpected guest enjoy the food as if it owned the office. Meanwhile, Jinwoo and Hae-in traveled through the shadows. During the journey, Jinwoo confirmed the theory he had been considering. Shadow Exchange wasn't limited to transporting only himself. It created a pathway through the shadows, allowing him to bring other people along as well. The entrance was any nearby shadow. The destination was the location of one of his shadow soldiers. It was an extraordinary ability, capable of covering enormous distances in an instant. Its only drawback was the 3-hour cooldown after each use. Moments later, they emerged inside the Hunters Association's training gymnasium. As they stepped out of the shadows, the motion-sensitive lights flickered on one after another, illuminating the vast practice hall. Hae-in looked around in amazement. Even as an S-rank hunter, she had never experienced anything like instant travel through shadows. Jinwoo, however, was already focused on the upcoming test. Just as they were about to begin, Hae-in suddenly realized something. She had forgotten to bring her sword. Jinwoo smiled. "Didn't you once fight with a pickaxe?" The memory instantly brought a blush to Hae-in's face. Embarrassed, she looked away while Jinwoo let out a quiet laugh. "I'm only joking." Hae-in decided to borrow one of the practice weapons stored in the gym. Using her hunter identification card, she unlocked the equipment room. Jinwoo mentioned that the reserve weapons were designed mainly for training and weren't nearly as durable as those hunters normally carried into battle. After carefully inspecting the rack, Hae-in selected a sword with a length and balance similar to her usual weapon. Giving it a few practice swings, she nodded with satisfaction. It would be enough. Jinwoo asked whether she was comfortable fighting with an unfamiliar blade. Hae-in answered without hesitation. "Real monsters don't wait for you to have the perfect weapon." Jinwoo nodded in agreement. Adaptability was one of the most important qualities a hunter could possess. Satisfied with her answer, he summoned one of his shadow soldiers. A dark shadow spread across the floor. From it emerged a silent knight, clad in black armor. It was Igris, Jinwoo's most skilled swordsman. He calmly explained the rules of the test. If you defeat Igris, you pass. If you decide you can't continue and surrender, the test ends there. For a brief moment, Jinwoo considered summoning Baru instead, but he quickly dismissed the idea. Baru's overwhelming power would make the trial hopeless. Igris was more than strong enough to test Hae-in while still giving her a genuine chance to prove herself. Hae-in raised the borrowed sword and settled into her stance. Just then, Jinwoo remembered something she had said moments earlier, that the weapon itself didn't matter. A faint smile appeared on his face. "Turn around for a second." Without questioning him, Hae-in did as she was told. Jinwoo opened his inventory and withdrew the Demon King's longsword. He handed the legendary weapon to Igris. The knight accepted it with silent respect, gripping the blade as dark energy rippled around him. The challenge had just become far more difficult. With both fighters ready, Jinwoo stepped back. Then, with a simple gesture, he signaled for the battle to begin. As Hae-in turned around, she immediately noticed that Igris was no longer holding his usual weapon. Instead, he gripped a sword wreathed in crackling blue lightning, a far more powerful blade than before. Without giving her a moment to react, Igris attacked. With a swift swing of his sword, he unleashed a bolt of lightning that shot toward Hae-in with incredible speed. Her instincts took over. Moving with cat-like agility, she leaped backward at the last possible moment. The lightning narrowly missed her and exploded against the wall behind her, leaving behind a blackened crater that demonstrated its terrifying destructive power. Watching from the sidelines, Jinwoo nodded in approval. Hae-in's reflexes had exceeded even his expectations. Most hunters would have been seriously injured or killed outright by an attack that fast. Hae-in tightened her grip on her borrowed sword. Her eyes never left Igris. Without hesitation, she charged straight at him. Their blades collided with explosive force, sending bright sparks flying across the gymnasium as steel met steel in a fierce exchange. At that same moment, Chairman Go-gun-hee was working in his office at the Hunters Association headquarters. Located on the top floor of the main building, his office overlooked the entire association complex. As he reviewed a stack of confidential documents, something outside his window caught his attention. The lights inside the training gymnasium were on. That was strange. According to the schedule, no one had reserved the facility that day. Curious, Go-gun-hee contacted his secretary and asked her to confirm whether the gym had been booked. After checking the records, she reported that there were no reservations. Growing more curious, Go requested that the gymnasium's security cameras be displayed on his monitor. Moments later, the surveillance feed appeared on the screen. His eyes widened. Inside the gym, Sung Jin-Woo and Cha Hae-in were locked in an intense sparring match. Lightning flashed across the room, while swords clashed with tremendous force. For a moment, Go-gun-hee simply stared. Then a gentle smile spread across his face. His thoughts wandered back to the way Hae-in had greeted Jinwoo after the Jew Island raid. Watching the two of them training together now, he couldn't help wondering if there might be something more than friendship between them. The thought amused him. Rather than continue watching, Go-gun-hee smiled to himself and instructed his secretary to switch off the surveillance cameras. He also asked her to record it in the maintenance log as a routine system check. Once the screen went dark, he leaned back in his chair with a quiet chuckle. Even after returning to his paperwork, he could still feel faint tremors traveling through the building as powerful shockwaves from the sparring match shook the walls of his office. Despite the unmistakable signs of the battle, he never looked up again. The smile remained on his face. The sight of two young S-rank hunters training together filled him with a quiet sense of warmth and nostalgia. Content. He returned to his work. Back in the gymnasium, Jinwoo watched the battle with growing surprise. Hae-in was proving to be far stronger than he had expected. Even with the Demon King's longsword in hand, Igris was gradually being pushed back by her incredible speed and swordsmanship. A powerful strike finally sent Igris crashing into the wall. Jinwoo realized there was little point in continuing the duel. He raised a hand. That's enough. The match came to an end. To his surprise, however, Hae-in didn't look satisfied. She turned toward him and asked, "Is Igris really your strongest shadow soldier?" Jinwoo hesitated. He knew exactly what she was asking. She wanted to face his most powerful summon. Concern flashed across his mind. He didn't want her getting hurt. But the determination burning in Hae-in's eyes never wavered. She accepted the danger. She wanted to challenge the strongest. After a moment of silence, Jinwoo finally nodded. Impressed by her resolve, he summoned another shadow. The darkness on the floor expanded. From within it emerged Baru. The Ant King's shadow radiated an overwhelming aura unlike anything Hae-in had felt before. Even after becoming a shadow soldier, Baru retained the terrifying instincts and combat abilities that had once made him the strongest enemy on Jew Island. Unlike Igris, Baru had been born to hunt hunters. The moment he appeared, the atmosphere inside the gym completely changed. Before making a single move, Baru respectfully turned toward Jinwoo, silently awaiting his master's command. Jinwoo met his gaze and issued a clear order. Fight her. Defeat her. But under no circumstances are you allowed to injure her. Baru bowed his head in absolute obedience. Then, he let out a deafening battle cry. The terrifying roar echoed throughout the gymnasium. Every light fixture hanging from the ceiling shattered instantly, plunging the entire training hall into darkness. The shockwave rippled through the air like a violent storm. Standing across from him, Heian felt a chill run down her spine. For the first time since entering the gym, she instinctively understood just how frightening Sung Jin-Woo's strongest shadow truly was. Baru slowly extended the razor-sharp claws hidden within his fingers. Jinwoo spoke in a firm voice. "Remember my order. You are not to harm her." The moment Baru heard his master's command, the bloodthirst in his eyes immediately faded. His loyalty to Jinwoo outweighed every instinct driving him toward battle. Without hesitation, he retracted his claws. Although his desire to win remained unchanged, he would obey his master's command without question. Seeing an opening, Heian rushed forward. She intended to seize the initiative before Baru could attack. But in the blink of an eye, he disappeared. Her eyes widened. An instant later, Baru materialized behind her. His speed was so overwhelming that she had completely lost sight of him. For a split second, she remembered the battle on Jew Island. She had witnessed this terrifying speed before. This time, however, she refused to be caught off guard. Forcing herself to stay calm, Heian immediately counterattacked. Her sword flashed through the air again and again. Dozens of strikes flowed together in a relentless combination. Yet Baru avoided every single one. He barely moved. With the slightest tilt of his head, a small shift of his body, a subtle turn of his shoulders, every attack missed by the narrowest margin. His movements were flawless, elegant, efficient. His incredible speed left countless afterimages, making it seem as though several bears were standing before her at once. The difference between them became painfully obvious. Baru had already decided how he would win. Jinwoo had forbidden him from hurting Heian. That meant there was only one option. He would completely overwhelm her until she accepted defeat on her own. Heian could hardly believe what she was seeing. Despite attacking with everything she had, Baru calmly avoided every strike without the slightest sign of effort. When she aimed directly for his neck, he merely leaned backward a fraction of an inch. Her blade sliced through empty air. It was almost as if he knew exactly what she was going to do before she did it. Frustration slowly crept into her mind. How could a mere shadow summon possess such incredible strength? And if Baru was this powerful, just how strong was Sung Jin-Woo, the hunter who commanded him so effortlessly? Before she could gather her thoughts, Baru suddenly closed the distance. A suffocating aura of death engulfed her. The overwhelming killing intent pouring from him froze her body in place. For one terrifying moment, she believed she was about to die. Instead of attacking, Baru threw back his head and released a deafening roar. The explosion of magical power surged through the gymnasium like a hurricane. The shockwave blasted Heian backward, forcing her to skid across the floor before she managed to regain her footing. Watching from nearby, Jinwoo frowned. He had never intended for the test to become so one-sided. Quietly, he asked, "Are you ready to surrender?" He hoped she had seen enough to understand the gap between them. But Heian's answer never changed. "I can still fight." The determination burning in her eyes remained unshaken. Jinwoo watched her in silence. He hadn't expected her resolve to be this strong. Even after witnessing the overwhelming difference in power, she refused to give up. That unwavering spirit impressed him. At the same time, it made him uneasy. Unlike his other shadow soldiers, Baru still retained the instincts of the terrifying creature he had once been. Although highly intelligent and completely loyal, his nature as the Ant King still lingered beneath the surface. The desire to hunt, to kill, to dominate. Those instincts never truly disappeared. Even now, Jinwoo could sense Baru fighting to suppress them. He knew that if Heian made one careless mistake, especially if she aimed for a vulnerable point, Baru's predatory instincts might take over for a brief moment. Then something changed. Baru's posture shifted. His instincts flared. To a predator, prey that continued resisting despite overwhelming defeat became an irritation that demanded to be crushed. His claws slowly extended once more. In the next instant, he lunged. The attack was so fast it was nearly invisible. But Heian was ready. Relying on her exceptional reflexes, she narrowly evaded the strike. For a brief moment, both fighters stopped. Their eyes met. Neither was willing to retreat. The air itself seemed charged with tension as the decisive clash approached. Realizing ordinary attacks would never reach her opponent, Heian activated her greatest sword technique. Sword dance. Her movements became impossibly smooth and graceful. Each step flowed seamlessly into the next. Her blade traced elegant arcs through the air with breathtaking speed, transforming the battlefield into what looked like a deadly performance. Steel clashed against Baru's razor-sharp claws again and again. The sharp echoes rang throughout the darkened gymnasium as the duel reached an entirely new level. Despite Baru's calm expression, his growing irritation was becoming obvious. The battle had gone on long enough. To him, the outcome was already decided. Deciding to end the match, Baru waited for the perfect moment. As Heian swung her sword toward him, Baru reached out with his bare hand and caught the blade. The sight shocked her. Before she could react, Baru casually twisted his wrist. Crack! The sword shattered instantly. The broken pieces fell to the ground, leaving Heian holding only a short, jagged fragment. Yet, even after losing her weapon, her determination did not disappear. Her eyes remained sharp. Her will remained unbroken. Instead of retreating, she poured every ounce of her magical power into the remaining piece of her sword. A brilliant light began to gather around the broken blade. The energy grew stronger and stronger until the fragment shone with overwhelming intensity. Heian prepared to use a skill she had never revealed before. For Swords of Light. The glowing blade trembled with concentrated power. Seeing a small opening after Baru lowered his guard following the destruction of her sword, Heian immediately acted. She launched herself forward. With every remaining bit of strength, she thrust the radiant blade toward him. Watching from the side, Jinwoo's expression changed. He instantly understood the danger. Something was wrong. In that brief moment, something deep inside Baru awakened. The command Jinwoo had given him, defeat Heian, but do not harm her, was suddenly pushed aside. A much older instinct surfaced. A command inherited from his former existence. Annihilate all enemies. Baru's entire mindset changed. The opponent before him was no longer someone he needed to defeat carefully. She was now a threat that had to be destroyed. His eyes sharpened. His claws extended. And with terrifying speed, he rushed forward. Heian froze. The overwhelming killing intent struck her like a wave. Her body refused to move. She closed her eyes, preparing herself for what seemed like certain death. But before Baru's claws could reach her, Jinwoo appeared. In an instant, he caught Baru's attack with his bare hands. The force behind the strike was tremendous, yet Jinwoo stopped it effortlessly. Baru's eyes widened. The moment he realized who stood before him, his entire body trembled. He immediately understood his mistake. Without hesitation, Baru jumped backward and dropped to the ground. He lowered his head deeply, bowing before his master. His actions were filled with regret. He begged for forgiveness. Jinwoo remained silent for a moment, staring at his shadow soldier. He understood exactly what had happened. Baru's loyalty to him had never weakened. But the instincts left behind from his former life as a killing machine had briefly overwhelmed his command. The nature of the Ant King still existed within him. With a quiet sigh, Jinwoo turned away. Nearby, Heian had collapsed from exhaustion. The battle had pushed her body beyond its limits. Looking at her, Jinwoo couldn't understand. Why had she fought this hard? This was only a test. An entrance exam for a newly created guild that didn't even have an established reputation yet. A hunter of Cha Heian's level had nothing to gain from risking her life for such an opportunity. It made no sense. Jinwoo approached her and asked directly, "Why are you doing this?" He wanted an answer, a reason that could explain her determination. But Heian remained silent. Her expression gave nothing away. Her refusal to explain only made Jinwoo more confused. He asked again, was there something else behind her actions? Then, a strange thought crossed his mind. Could it be that she had feelings for him? The idea seemed unlikely, almost impossible. But considering everything she had done, it was the only explanation he could think of. Heian's eyes widened slightly. His question had caught her completely off guard. Seeing her reaction, Jinwoo immediately began questioning himself. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe there was another reason. However, after a long silence, Heian finally spoke. Quietly, and with some hesitation, she admitted the truth. He was right. She did have feelings for him. Jinwoo froze. He had expected many possible answers. That was not one of them. Only then did he understand that her determination had never been about the guild itself. It came from something much deeper. Meanwhile, across the ocean in the United States, tension filled the Hunter Command Center of the Federal Bureau of Hunters. Director David Brennan sat in his office, staring at the latest reports. His frustration was impossible to hide. Their attempt to recruit Sung Jin-Woo had failed. The one hunter they desperately wanted on their side had refused. The door opened. Assistant Director Michael Connor entered the room, accompanied by Norma Selner. Brennan immediately turned his attention toward them. He wanted answers, not excuses. His voice was cold as he demanded an explanation for what had happened. Michael knew he had to reveal the truth. According to Norma Selner's observations, Sung Jin-Woo was not simply another powerful hunter. He was something far more extraordinary. Her words immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. Brennan's expression hardened. Michael continued, Jinwoo is one of the kings. The statement caused everyone to fall silent. A king. The term carried enormous weight. Brennan immediately understood the implication. Did this mean Sung Jin-Woo possessed power comparable to the national-level hunters? Those rare individuals whose strength placed them far above ordinary S-rank hunters? Before he could ask further, Norma Selner stepped forward. She began explaining what she had sensed. Every awakened hunter gained their abilities through a connection to another dimension, the other side. That connection was what allowed her ability to perceive the true nature of an awakened individual's power. Most powerful hunters appeared as a bright source of energy. Their strength shone like an intense light. Those were the individuals she recognized as kings. But when she looked into Sung Jin-Woo's eyes, she saw something completely different. Her voice trembled as she described the experience. When I looked at Sung Jin-Woo, I didn't see light. I didn't see a connection to the other side. I saw darkness. An endless, consuming darkness. The room became completely silent. Norma continued. He doesn't borrow his power from somewhere else. He is the source. There is nothing feeding his strength. He himself is the darkness. Her explanation left everyone speechless. Brennan struggled to process what he had just heard. After a moment, he asked the question that immediately came to mind. Does that mean he's evil? Norma slowly shook her head. No. This isn't about good or evil. It's about the nature of his power. She explained that Jinwoo's strength was fundamentally different from that of other awakened hunters. Other hunters relied on an external source. Their abilities had rules, limits, restrictions. But Jinwoo was different. His power came from within himself, meaning there was no known ceiling, no obvious weakness, no limitations that applied to ordinary awakened beings. The room grew heavier with every word. Michael stared in disbelief. No limits. No weaknesses. The realization sounded almost impossible. Norma quietly nodded. That was the terrifying truth. Director Brennan finally understood the scale of what they were dealing with. He thanked Norma for her explanation, but his expression remained serious. The information had changed everything. Suddenly, Brennan pushed himself away from his desk and stood. His mind was already moving toward his next decision. Michael noticed immediately. Where are you going? Brennan didn't answer the question directly. Instead, he gave a simple command. Follow me. We're going to basement level 24. The seriousness in his voice left no room for discussion. Michael followed as Brennan headed toward the elevator. As the doors closed and they began descending, Brennan finally explained his plan. If we can't recruit Sung Jin-Woo using Norma's ability, then we'll need another method. His voice remained calm, but the urgency behind his words was unmistakable. We have to prepare for the worst-case scenario. Michael's expression changed. Basement level 24. Just hearing those words was enough to make him uneasy. That area was the most restricted and secretive section of the entire Federal Bureau of Hunters headquarters. A place very few people had ever entered. As the elevator continued descending deeper underground, Brennan stared ahead. His voice remained steady. If Sung Jin-Woo truly has no limits, then we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Do you remember the first S-rank gate that ever appeared? Michael asked. Director Brennan slowly nodded, his expression becoming serious as he recalled the disaster that had once shaken the entire world. It was the dungeon break that had wiped out the entire West Coast, an event that remained unforgettable even years later. After the catastrophe, The United States gathered the strongest hunters from across the globe, offering enormous rewards to anyone willing to face the unprecedented threat. Many powerful hunters joined the raid, but when it was over, only 5 had managed to survive. Those 5 survivors would later become known as the national-level hunters, individuals whose power and influence were recognized as being equal to that of entire nations. However, the raid became legendary for one terrifying reason above all others. Kamish, the dragon known as the inextinguishable flame. Kamish had single-handedly slaughtered hundreds of elite hunters, leaving behind a devastating scar in the history of awakened beings. His name became a symbol of destruction and fear. As the elevator descended to the basement level, Director Brennan suddenly turned toward Michael. "Can you believe there was actually a blessing hidden within that tragedy?" Brennan asked. Michael was confused for a moment, but then he understood what the director meant. Brennan noticed his realization and nodded as they continued walking toward the final room on the floor. Inside was a heavily secured area. Brennan approached a reinforced safe and carefully unlocked it. Within the safe, protected inside a tempered glass case, was a runestone unlike any other. The runestone extracted from the remains of Kamish. Michael's eyes widened as he recognized the artifact. Seeing his reaction, Brennan began explaining. "It's been 8 years since the Kamish raid," Brennan said calmly. "And during all that time, we have never encountered a mage-type national-level hunter." His gaze remained fixed on the runestone. "This has been sitting here, abandoned in this cold basement, waiting for someone powerful enough to inherit its power." Brennan paused before continuing. "But I believe Kamish left behind one final gift for our country. A gift that could change everything." The director stared at the powerful artifact, his mind filled with countless possibilities. This runestone, created from the remains of the legendary dragon Kamish, could be the answer they desperately needed. Perhaps it could help them deal with their current crisis. Perhaps it could even provide a way to confront a force as overwhelming as Sung Jin-Woo. For Brennan, the last remnant of Kamish represented their greatest hope, a hidden power that might determine whether their nation could survive whatever threat awaited them in the future.